You're listening to Idea Collider, a show that explores the world of asymmetric learning. On this show, I will sit down with pharmaceutical experts and business leaders to discuss how to embrace uncertainty and the different learning style that follows. I'm your host, Mike Rea. Let's get into the show. Welcome to actually quite an exciting episode of Idea Collider for me. I'm delighted to introduce my better looking and smarter colleague, Rick. Rick joined us about 12 years ago, and we thought it'd be great to go back to one of our kind of key highlights, the Reblozyl project with our clients of the time. So, Rick, say hi to the folks and say who you are.
Yeah, great. Glad to be here, Mike, and go through one of these amazing case studies back from when I first joined. My name's Rick. I'm the head of growth and innovation over here at IDEA. But this really takes me back, I think, about 10 or 12 years ago, right when we started. We had the opportunity to work with an awesome team, actually a combination of teams, which was what made this particular case study so exciting. A combination of Acceleron and Celgene that were relentlessly and flawlessly able to execute against a early stage positioning. I believe we engaged them in early phase 2 on what was then luspatercept to explore what it could be across a series of hematological indications. And that was an area that was going to be a challenge given the competitive benchmarking and the external side, but also on the internal side, there was a lot of different ways to define what this asset was, looking at the various ways we could have depicted the mechanism or the effect that it was having. And the team really found a clear path, a clear North Star that they executed against both internally and then helped the market shaping externally to understand and value. So it really ended up changing the lives of tons of patients. And I'm excited to share that with you today and excited to engage that team.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. And as people will see, I think this is one of the best client teams that we've ever had a chance to work with, full of energy, full of ideas. But to your point, I think, the ability for us to run through, our core tenets of mechanism of action, clearly mechanism of effect, which was something that we've introduced to the world of pharma, and mechanism of value, which, Reblozyl really does prove. So let's dive in and let the team talk. Okay, let's get going. So, Robin, can you tell me more about who you are, where you are now, and where we first met?
Okay, so I am still in the biotech industry. I started my career in Australia as a pharmacist and then moved to biotech, pharmaceuticals, and I had a great career with Celgene, working in marketing in Australia. And then I moved to the Asia Pacific team. In 2014, I moved to the global team, which is where I met Jane and Tracy and started working on luspatercept. I think we met you, Mike and Rick, in 2016 when we started to think about positioning for luspatercept. And I'm still in marketing in the global world, based in California.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Jane, tell us some more.
Yes, good to see you all again. So Jane Butler, I joined Celgene back in 2002 when we were a company of 300 and joined from after spending 18 years at Eli Lilly and Company. At Celgene, I was part of the group that launched Revlimid and then moved on to other things throughout the company. With the executive director of global marketing, working on luspatercept and some other drugs as well. Had the great fortune to partner with Acceleron, with Tracy, as we developed this asset and others too. And now I am the director of strategic initiatives at Fingerpaint Branding. We're a naming company, a branding company, and we do everything from non-proprietary clinical trial names, trade dress, scientific lexicon. I thought I was done working when I thought I retired from Celgene, but here I am 7 years later, still going strong and having failed retirement miserably. But having fun. And it's not a miserable retirement, don't get me wrong, but it's a grand failure.
Fantastic. And Tracy, you've been set up by Jane.
Indeed, Jane and Robin both, who I remember fondly from our times together on Reblozyl. Yeah, I'm a native to the Boston biotech neighborhood here, but prior to that, spent nearly a decade at Acceleron, who was the originator of luspatercept, later Reblozyl, and early days met Robin and Jane along the way as fabulous collaborators and partners. I sort of grew up many ways in the industry. I was the commercial lead from the Acceleron perspective in the collaboration for Reblozyl. So worked really, really hand in hand with the Celgene team. So much so that I still know that route from Newark to Summit very, very well. And 9.5 years at Acceleron, and it was really exciting to start on a program that was pre-proof of concept and be able to see it all the way through launch.
Fantastic. Well, maybe Tracy, if I can start with you, can you tell me what it was like at a biotech, when this was yours and yours alone before anything happened to it? How did that feel? What was your kind of ambition for the asset?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, it was from the time I joined Accelerant, it was always a collaboration.
Mhm.
And in my experience, a really positive collaboration with the Celgene and then later the BMS team. But working at a high science biotech that at the time I joined was early clinical stage, what you might imagine is this passion and belief in what this science can mean. And I was really fortunate to be able to spend 9.5 years there and watch this idea kicking off these proof of concept studies in various hematologic conditions come to fruition and work with the scientists that actually sort of invented and did these pivotal experiments, both preclinically and some clinically. So I think it was, when you're at a small biotech, I think there were 80 of us when I joined. It's an all in feeling. Everyone is tied to every piece of data that we've generated, tied to what the vision and the belief are. And it's great because it creates a really collaborative and supportive environment to bring the medicine forward.
How does it feel being the kind of biotech and a biotech pharma model? Do you feel equal?
Yeah, so I came by way of big pharma before I joined Acceleron. I had worked at the likes of Pfizer and Genzyme, so I've been at big companies. I think the major difference is there are more layers and levels and people to connect through when you're at a big organization, right? There are more processes in place, more committees, more decision makers or layers of decision makers. But like anything, it's people that matter. And, partnering with people who share the same vision and mission and alignment, ultimately figuring out how to get it done, I think worked really well between Acceleron and Celgene. And so while I was at a small biotech, I knew the Celgene processes of the committees and meetings we need to go through. Jane and Robin and I worked closely preparing for those, even if I wasn't in the room for them. And I mean, it really was a favorable situation where we were team luspatercept. And it wasn't, at least from our perspective, I think I would extend that to the clinical teams from what I saw. It wasn't, this part's mine, this part's yours. It was, this is what we need to do, whether we need to do it through Celgene in this moment or Acceleron in that moment. I'd say the experience of being at a big pharma previously primed me for knowing some of the navigation that needs to take place in bigger organizations.
Yeah, thanks. Jane, Robin, how does it feel from the other side of the desk?
Yeah, I would say one of the things I think that helped the collaboration was, as Tracy said, it's the people, but a lot of the things that she mentioned were shared between the companies. The partnership with Acceleron was one of the first that Celgene did. And I think it was done when Celgene was still basically a biotech itself,
Mhm.
right? It was still small, had just gone through that process. Yes, we had Revlimid, it was doing well and things, but we knew exactly where Acceleron was. We were still in that biotech kind of mindset together. We knew their aspirations were kind of to, do what Celgene did and become, a great pharmaceutical company. And so there were a lot of things that we could share along the way because we were having a shared experience individually, but collectively as well.
Mhm.
So, and to Tracy's point also, I think one of the, I would say, kind of a hallmark of Celgene was Celgene always had their eye on the ball. They knew what it like focused like a laser on whatever the task was. When it came to this collaboration, there was a focus like a laser on exactly we all agree where we needed to go, what we needed to do, how to get it done. We were we just had the same mission. And so I think that helped a lot as well.
Nice. And Robin, was that a Celgene thing? Have you seen that anywhere else? Or?
So I've seen the collaboration in other companies. When I first joined the global team at Celgene, it was my first experience working with a partner. And I gotta say it was a great experience. Working with Tracy and the team was really an extension of Celgene because Jane just mentioned, we were all working towards the same mission, the same goal. And I don't know how that works with other partners, other companies, but I really felt that the way we collaborated was really team-like, and Acceleron were almost a part of us rather than an extension. And as Tracy mentioned, she knows that route from Newark to Summit because we work so closely together. And it was great because sometimes we divided and conquered and really worked towards that goal with the resources that we had.
Mm. And was that because of the three of you, or was there more sort of cultural alignment between the companies?
I'll take a shot at that. I think both, but I will say I can't put myself in the Celgene organization exactly, but having been at bigger companies, the medicine or the product you're working on is always fighting for favor, resources, priority amongst the rest of the pipeline, right, within that company. And so similarly, we were there trying to fight for the resource, attention, priority along with our teammates at Celgene within the Celgene organization. For that reason, I do think Jane and Robin personally showed up as collaborators, brought me under the tent really early, right? Where it can go different ways with collaborators. And it strengthened, right? Our team, it strengthened the information sharing, it strengthened our ability to fight within, predominantly the Celgene organization as they were the primary resourcer of the asset in getting what we needed and getting that buy-in to go forward. But, my recollection of the days were like a lot of the teams extended that sort of we're all, like I said, team luspatercept, right? I saw it in the clinical side. I saw it in other places as well.
Yeah. And I think that's true. And I think that a lot of times, like you mentioned, clinical. So we each had our clinical leads, but just as the three of us would have conversation, and conversation doesn't just mean a nice chat like we're having now. We had very robust debates,
Mhm.
all in good spirit. And I know our clinical folks did that as well because things are not always straightforward and decisions have to be made and assumptions have to be made. And like Tracy said, you may have limited resources that you have to decide what is the best way to allocate those resources. And so having those robust discussions across within functions across the companies, whether it was in the marketing team like we were, or whether it was the clinical team, even project management and others, regulatory, all had to have the same kind of hand in glove relationship to pull this off.
Mm.
And
And
I mean, aside from Jane and Robin, my other favorite people at Celgene that I feel like from the Acceleron side, worked incredibly closely with were the medical team, both global and US. There were fantastic individuals there who, again, we all came to a shared understanding of what this medicine meant and what it could do. And we worked really closely with each other. So that I think is cultural to Celgene as well as Acceleron in the collaboration piece.
nice. And how ambitious was the company for, what luspatercept would become? Because my recollection going back was this was seen as a good but not going to be blockbuster drug. You look back now and it feels like that was going to be preordained. But how was it seen internally?
I think that's where you may find the ambitions were, as the biotech originator, right? And, let's be clear, this was our most advanced, first to be commercialized asset.
Yeah.
Acceleron had all our attention on this, right?
Mhm.
As we should as a small focused biotech. And I don't think anyone would ever suggest that the ambitions were small from the Acceleron side, from all the way from the top down. But I think that drive from the small partner in kind of reminding what this could be and helping build the understanding of what this could be, right? Not to say that there weren't also folks at Celgene alongside that, but certainly that comes from those who originate the product, right? So I would never say there were low ambitions or low expectations from the Acceleron side.
And how did it feel at Celgene?
Jade, I'll let you take that one.
yeah, I mean, this was a really important product for for Celgene. It was really important for the collaboration with Acceleron. And this collaboration was really held up as an example of what collaborations moving forward at Celgene should and needed to look like.
Okay.
So there was that. There was at Celgene, at Acceleron as well, a focus really on the patients that we and the drug were serving and or hope to be serving. And so to that extent, we were 100% always looking out for patients who could benefit from this therapy, whether it was in the indications we were already looking at, whether it was in additional indications, but where would patients benefit from this great asset that Acceleron had developed?
Really well said, Jane.
Nice.
Yeah, so having that strong partnership and alignment on the drive and the aspirations back in 2016 and when we all started to work together was critical, right? When we look at the environment of MDS and beta thalassemia at the time, it was rigid. There was ESA dominance, fragmented patient populations, and we weren't clear on how we were going to be differentiated. I guess I'd love to hear from all of you. When you think back to that time, back to the environment that we were operating in, the data that we had, what was the biggest risk to luspatercept? What was the greatest uncertainty lingering in your mind?
For me, it was not being differentiated because one of the benefits was transfusion independence. And there were already competitors and products on the market that provided that. So, how could we stand out in a space where the benefit was the same? So, for me, that was one of the biggest challenges, which is why we ended up coming to you and I think landing in a really good space.
Yeah, I think the challenge with any drug as you're going through development is you always know what you hope you're going to end up with, but until you actually see the clinical data, the biggest risk is that you were wrong or the drug didn't live up to what the expectations that you hoped that it would have and didn't perform the way you wanted.
Yeah, and then I think I agree with both of you, and I think the maybe controllable element in that risk, because I agree with Robin, the risk was that this was relegated to another of an existing class, where in fact, we knew from the biology, we knew from preclinical, we knew from data generated that this was different and therefore deserved its sort of own space in the treatment paradigm and could benefit patients in a different way. But unless you generate information to support that, you can believe and understand the science. I think the challenge and the risk is, can you translate what you know, right? And can you translate what you know preclinically with clinical data and then actually explain and present that clinical data in a way that folks see it? I really think that's where a love and appreciation for the science that developed the medicine, as well as a love and appreciation for great science alone is not going to do that for you, came together nicely with the teams and kind of helped overcome that hurdle.
Nice. And as you were developing that, because there's sort of sense of commercial typically wants to present the unmet need in the landscape. Do you think the unmet need was well articulated by the market or had to work to carve that out?
So, there was still an unmet need because the existing therapies didn't help all the patients.
Mhm.
So there was definitely a gap and an unmet need. And I think to Tracy's point is how do you articulate that unmet need in a space where there are already therapies? How do you stand out?
Yeah. I think also with an entrenched treatment already in an established space, there are a lot of perceptions of what the benefit is and what the need may be that come from use and comfort, but aren't necessarily supported with data. And I think that was an interesting articulation of the need for us is what do you feel versus what is it actually showing in terms of the benefit to your patients? And when there's only one option, and that's a comfortable use, I think it was interesting to tease out perception versus reality there and the unmet need. And so it was always there. And I think it was appreciated that there was a need, but being able to highlight a little more clearly how something else could fill a meaningful need for a lot of individuals who could use treatment was valuable.
Oh,
Yeah, and one of the things I think that we had to work through as well was We had two indications that we were pursuing in two very, very different patient populations with very different treatments already being used. So we wanted to make sure that it didn't fit for the other or didn't work for the other. And so we needed to make sure that we didn't shortchange either one of those either. So that was another sort of tightrope that we needed to walk.
Yeah, we never wanted to leave a patient population behind, right? And so we had to be thoughtful about where that Venn diagram overlapped to be able to speak to really different populations in a way that was still meaningful because we didn't want to leave anyone out.
Yeah. I think it's such a critical point. Any advice for teams who are working towards two very disparate indications and trying to thread that needle on how to work collaboratively together to find a solution?
I think some of it came because we did look for we didn't focus on what was different, but we focused on what was similar.
And I think what helped as well was when we did look at how we could manage this is the two teams came together for the two different diseases. So you had that collective input, that collective voice on how can we ensure that we are not leaving any patient population behind by working together as two teams.
Yeah, and in all instances, the teams worked really closely with stakeholders of the respective diseases. And so we built a strong understanding of patient community experience. And that's where you start to see the common threads of, okay, these are different on the face of it in age, in treatment, in establishment, in so many things. But then hold on, what's the measurement of benefit? What do you feel and experience? And all of a sudden you can find those common threads. And again, hopefully where, we felt we were making the impact as well. Different, but at the end of the day, the measurement for success in both of those was not variably different. And so we were able to, I think, coalesce around, where we found those similarities. But you have to listen, right, to be able to tease that out first.
And can the three of you kind of remember any kind of pivotal moments when this could have derailed or you felt like you were running down towards a kind of successful finish line? Any kind of pivot points?
I can remember as you get closer to launch, as you advance, you develop your proof of concept, then you work on your phase 3, and then during phase 3, you do some of this work, and then the phase 3 reads out, and new folks join, and more folks join, and everyone has kind of new thoughts and ideas. And I think this is true of any medicine developing throughout. To me, those pivot points is continuing to solicit good thoughts, of course, but keep folks aligned as where's the true North Star, right? There are a number of North Stars you can talk to. And there were challenges, right? This was a great collaboration. And really, I think everyone who worked on this looks back on it positively and fondly. We had good humans working on this, which makes it fun. But that doesn't mean, to Jane's point, there weren't disparate perspectives or disagreements. And especially as someone new came in without history, the challenge was these moments where someone could have said, nah, I don't like that. I'm going this way. If you really want to be effective at communicating, it needs to be consistent, right? And needs to be aligned. There are always opportunities for people to say, I can do better. I'm going to go do it this way. I always say a perfect message in a sea of fragmented message is so much less effective than a really good message that's consistent across the board. I'll take that any day over one person with the perfect thing to say. I think we did a good job at that, but it took effort at times. Jane, I can see you nodding. I think you probably remember some of the efforts.
Yeah.
And I think you're always likely to have some internal tension, let's call it, when you have such a bold idea with a bold concept. And I don't think you can tell the story of luspatercept without talking about how we shifted the language and the understanding of what's important, really dialing in this idea of targeting ineffective erythropoiesis and giving the world a way to think and talk about that with an erythroid maturation agent. One of the things I really wanted to get into today was how did that idea of erythroid maturation emerge? What was the unifying insight, or was it kind of a gradual realization that, hey, that really works for the way the world should depict the value of luspatercept?
So I think there was a seminal paper in Nature on a mechanism which helped elucidate where in the erythroid process Bill was potentially working, or was potentially impacting. And so that idea of maturation versus early generation proliferation stimulation was distinctly different, but certainly not appreciated outside of the folks who read that paper and talked about it. And so, again, I think this was a perspective of really taking the time to understand and appreciate the science, and then taking the time to appreciate what existed, right? And an understanding of the stakeholders to figure out why it's different and why the fact that it's different matters, and then be able to support it. So the idea of maturation, I think, and I don't know, Jane or Robin, if you remember one moment of like, this was it. But to me, that there was I remember a million years ago, and so my brain's fuzzy, there was a publication in Nature Med that was really significant. But why maturation mattered and why that was impactful in these disease states built over time, and being able to support and elucidate that story.
Yeah, I remember we had a lot of discussion. We put on a table to figure out, what it was we were doing or thinking about. So there was a lot of thought really about the specific words we chose. But the seminal moment I remember is, again, it goes back to like, listen to your customer. We were doing market research and we had a number of different concepts we're putting in front of people. And when they got to this concept of maturation, and they kind of went, oh, oh. And when you somebody actually go, oh, you realize that it's something really different. And it's something that put a light bulb in their heads as well and really made them start thinking. So that to me was a really important insight that we gathered through market research, through listening to customers about what was important to them.
Oh, right, because that's. I remember when I positioned Avastin that the idea of angiogenesis was novel, but when they saw it, people started to use it as a way of explaining how the drug was working. Until they'd seen that word, they were never going to use it. But suddenly they were never going to use any other word afterwards.
And I think to that point, I do remember a pivotal moment where I did an analysis of some of the podium presentations, the literature, and I think at one point we had 10 or 11 different ways to describe luspatercept.
Mhm.
And until we landed on that ineffective erythropoiesis and then erythroid maturation was the aha moment. This is what makes sense. This is where it works. And also, once you have that erythroid maturation, here is the benefit of transfusion independence. So I think it was that pivotal moment as well of let's have everyone saying the same thing and having a common understanding of what this drug can do.
How easy was that internally? Because I've been in a few companies where we've introduced something, and not everyone is as aligned and kind of focused as the three of you were. How hard was that internally?
I mean, it takes effort for sure, right? I think there's always concentric circles of like all in, buy in, right? And then there's a bit of a next circle out where, yeah, I buy in, but I might forget, right? Next time I do it because it's not top of mind. And then you go further out, and some people are like, words don't matter, right? I've dealt with all of those, and they're all well intentioned, by the way. So it means you need people on point and kind of processes to make sure that, here's lexicon. Are we having the right folks connect and review and discuss? And that's where the collaboration piece, I think, is highly important. So it takes effort and management, but that should be the expectation, right? Even the best of it in terms of collaboration, there's just human nature and muscle memory involved, right? In what people are used to saying or writing or doing.
At the risk of sending Robin into just a tizzy here, you'll remember the communication document that we put together that we had to do. I don't know how many times we wrote and rewrote this document, but it was, to Tracy's point, it was, here's what you want to communicate. Here's how we're going to communicate it. The specific words we're going to use. Here's what you're not going to say. But then we had another column that was here's why.
Yeah.
And we explained the rationale behind our decisions, why we chose this word, not that word, why we were talking about erythroid maturation, not GDF11, those kinds of things. And I think that helped people like I said, it took us a long time and many iterations to get that document exactly the way we needed it. But I think that really helped people remember and stick with the plan.
Agree. And just to build on that as well, I remember once that document was done, doing a roadshow with each function. As Tracy mentioned, it takes effort. And, going to the meeting, the clinical meeting, the regulatory meeting, and going through the document of here's what to say, here's not what to say, and the big why, and allowing the teams to ask questions rather than just sending the document by email. Okay, here's what we say moving forward. It was a real effort of explaining the why and giving them the opportunity to ask the questions.
Yeah, I love that, Robin, because I think that is the difference between a bigger bigger pharma biotech versus a smaller. We did the same thing, but it's, 5 people in a room, right, who represent regulatory, clinical, preclinical, medcoms, and PRIR, and we can go through that relatively quickly or sit across the hall from them, so you get that touch point more readily and kind of more organically at a smaller biotech, whereas at a bigger organization, it's more individuals who are split focus, right, or who need that time, and the fact that you brought it down to that, personal moment where people could have discussions and questions, it makes it stick. I think that was really effective.
And to that point, Tracy, you always say like you have to know your customer. That's both internal and external. So from an internal perspective, we did have that main document and had presentations, but we tailored those presentations to the audiences that we were really educating about how we were going to communicate. And we also had sort of a one-page sheet. So yes, we had that document, but then we had a one-page summary so that even from the highest C-suite level executives to anybody else on the team that needed to communicate either internally or externally, they could use that deeper document to get familiar, to build other pieces, to go into more depth. But they had that one-page summary of all the key things they really needed to know, the key communication points. And I think that really helped everybody as well.
Yeah. And I think an important part too is there was credibility and buy-in to that document, right? So that document wasn't Robin, Tracy, and Jane in a room coming up with our favorite way to say this, right? It was ensuring with the R&D team, is this scientifically accurate, right? Are we stepping in the wrong bounds by saying it's something this way? Help me understand. It's ensuring with regulatory that this is viable. So by the time that came to place, it did have a lot of input and buy-in. It was maybe shepherded, or that process was led by more of the marketing team and medical, I would say. And really, Acceleron at the early days didn't have medical affairs, so it was Celgene. But it was credible by the time it was baked because we had all those perspectives and buy-in into it. So I think that helped as well.
Yeah, I remember some of those workshops where you literally did have a kind of huge amount of discussion and debate from so many of the different stakeholders that by the time you ended up at the end of the meeting, everyone had a chance to attack it. One of the things I was sort of mindful of with the three of you was you saw this get up to the label, you saw this through market shaping, through market development activities, as well as the kind of brand communications. How, was it important that you stayed with the brand all the way through launch, or, what else was critical to getting this landed?
So I can't comment on that part, Mike.
Yeah, please.
What I was going to say, though, is even, what you just described. So there was early scientific understanding of what this does. There was a listening to the stakeholders of what does this mean to you and how do we explain the benefit. The fact that this was an established class on the label took a significant lift in understanding from our regulatory teams, right? And they leveraged the data that were generated both clinically and preclinically. And so it takes a village to really orchestrate this in the way that it was done, which was critical. And I think for us, making sure it goes back, I know like I'm hitting the hammer on collaboration hard, but it goes back to all those touch points and check-ins. And are we on the same page? Because Robin, Jane, and Tracy say erythroid maturation agent does not make it so. It does not end up in the label because of that, right? There was a lot of work to get there from all the cross-functional partners. And so I think that was critical up and through launch. And then, launch was an interesting time. It was launched during the pandemic. It was launched during one of the companies being acquired. There were a lot of moving pieces, but I think what was critical, again, from the Acceleron perspective, was just trying to continue to maintain that common ground and common understanding and vision. And then, of course, in a launch, you're always tracking to say, okay, did what we think make sense? Right? Were we right? Do we need to change tack? That was a huge challenge, right? We were virtual. We had new faces coming in. People were going through an acquisition of their company, and that creates challenges. I think, again, people believed in the medicine. The medicine had significant benefits for people. And so it all came down to it wasn't, despite those extraneous events happening, it was people came to common ground. And I think that served the need.
Yeah. Robin?
Oh, I was just saying, I don't think I can answer that question because I left just before launch, not long
Okay.
after Jane.
Okay.
But to Tracy's point, I think because people believed in why we called it an erythroid maturation agent, is that every function was able to pull it through, including regulatory into the label. US marketing team and medical team obviously were communicating that's what's important as well as global. So I think that having that common understanding throughout every single function helped every function pull it through.
I know we talked a little bit about seminal moments earlier, but was there a moment that any of you realized, hey, the market isn't just thinking about this as another ESA? That, obviously we had internally been thinking about it in this new way and we've been driving new lexicon and thinking about it. But was there a presentation, a scientific was there anything that was that aha moment that the market's now seeing it the way we are?
I feel like there's probably an ASH, American Society of Hematology moment, but I don't know that I can dust that off specifically. I mean, I think my recollection, but this is not data backed right now, so I can't source my perspective. But my recollection is ineffective erythropoiesis begin to come to the forefront of the discussion in terms of the cause of the anemia, right? Which was a precursor to, what's the solution to address ineffective erythropoiesis. That was really elevated. But I can't remember a specific moment or frankly, even specific talks where I can say I remember that happening because it was so long ago. But there was my perception, at least, is that there was sort of a shift in tides in what was being talked about in scientific and clinical circles. And, it was an awareness, right, of what the challenge was.
Okay. I know we've only got a couple of minutes left and I want to be mindful of time, but if you were to go back to 2015, 10 years ago, is there anything that you wish you could tell yourself back then about what was to come?
It'll all be worth it.
Trust your instincts and trust your partners, right? There are times in any challenging situation where you're like, oh gosh, is this right? Or is this the right way? Are we doing this? Does this make sense? Especially when you're trying to do something that hasn't yet been done. You're creating a new language, you're shaping a class, you're shaping an understanding that isn't there already. But trust your instincts, but also leverage what you know and what you can prove to stay credible. And I think we did that, right? So I don't know that I'd tell myself because we did something different, but it's those are the lessons learned from it that I always take forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trust will verify.
Yeah, Robin, Jane?
So I don't know if there's anything I'd go back and tell myself, but I've worked on a number of hematology products and blockbusters in my career. And I have to say, this has been one of my favorites to be able to shape the market, create a new class of drug, and show that innovation is definitely one of the most exciting things in my career that I still hold to this day.
So far, yeah.
I think there was an openness, though, Robin, just hearing you talk again. I think remain open, right? There was an openness of all the teams to ideas and to building. And I think that's how we got there. No one came in and said, I've already done this. I know what to do. Let's move forward. Maybe because it was new, you had to be open to how to think about it. But I think that benefited everyone significantly.
I say not that again, to Robin's point, not that I would tell myself this because I think we did a good job at this, but what I would advise other teams is be inclusive. So we had teams that were medical, marketing, market access, and market research always together. I had, and I'm sure Tracy did too, frequent meetings with regulatory, clinical, project leadership, corporate communications, investor relations, manufacturing, critical, right? We can't wait. Someone manufacturing once told me, and it stuck with me all these years. He said to me, Jane, you can't sell what I can't make. So he said it just that way. And it's so true, right? You have to make sure that manufacturing's on board. What was this going to look like? What did they need to be involved with? What needed to be printed on the label? Was there room to print certain things on, like just being inclusive and talking to people? We're all sitting here on a Zoom call, and lots of people are on Zoom calls these days, but you have to go talk to people. You can talk on Zoom, that's fine, but talk to people.
I think also, just Tracy, to your point on the openness, obviously got to credit Mike, Rick, and the team that brought these ideas to us and our teams to be open, because without you bringing these ideas, we wouldn't have been able to achieve that common language and create that innovation and new class of therapy.
That's very kind of you to say. I was going to actually echo that, because I think it's rare from our side to have a team as kind of functional as the three of you were. Receptivity is not always guaranteed, right? When you bring in someone that's going to challenge people, and having a kind of bold and brave team is, really a key part of landing some of the best ones we've done. So, full credit to you guys. And I remember the feeling of talking to you all at that time. So, it's come back to me in this conversation. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this and kind of, walking back through the memories a little bit. Congratulations on what you achieved. I mean, you look at what an outstanding blockbuster this has become. Praise to all of you for having got it there.
Well, as Tracy said, it takes a village. So it wasn't just us, for sure. It was all the people that we were, even the preclinical folks that we worked with had a big part in this. Certainly all the folks who have been involved through the launch and the execution of it. Having a great idea that doesn't get executed doesn't get anybody anywhere. So it really does take a whole village of people all aligned, all marching to the same tune, saying the same things, talking about the drug and what it can do, what it means for patients, what it means for clinicians, and making a difference.
I think it's unfortunate. That's pretty rare, though. When you get to drug launches, how rare that situation is, given how pivotal, critical it is to the success of potential blockbusters. The human elements and those kind of team elements are so overlooked, I think, in many companies.
Well, and like you said, Mike, there was a trust of the companies when we went into this. So when we were working on this project with you and Rick and your team, we had a lot of different ways we could have gone. And this one was maybe a little more scientific than others were, right? It's not like the emotional. And a lot of times in positioning work and things like that, you'll hear people talk almost like in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But so I think even when we came up with this idea and it wasn't at the pinnacle of those hierarchy of needs, there was like, are we aiming too low? But I think that trust and the testing and the listening to customers and everything that came to be after that really put it in perspective to say, no, this really is the right way to go. But it was that bottom foundation of trust that we had that allowed us that healthy skepticism to ask the questions and challenge ourselves. And then to say, no, for this one application, this one instance, this really is the height of that pinnacle.
Yeah. Phenomenal. We could go on for another half hour and I'd still be enjoying the conversation. But Robin, Jane, Tracy, thank you so much for helping me remember what we did. And good luck with where you are now.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for getting the band back together.
That's it for this week's episode of Idea Collider. To continue the conversation, visit our website at ideapharma.com. Follow us in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcast. Until next time, I'm Mike Rea, wishing you great success.